Hello and welcome to the Canon podcast special spoiler review of Claudia Gray's The High Republic, The Fallen Star. I'm Matthew Neugebauer and I'm going to dive into what I thought of this incredible story, incredible novel. If you'd like to see the non-spoiler review, you can check out our regular Monday episode. Fair warning, spoilers starting now. The start was kind of syrupy, and what I mean is a lot of self-help statements on the part of characters, reflecting on the mindset they need and how to talk themselves up and whatnot, especially by Belle and some others who, to be fair, Belle is a Padawan, but a more senior one. And I was wondering, where is this going? Why are we getting all these statements? And I realized it was really to shore themselves up going forward in the crisis, the looming crisis ahead. And what follows is such a masterclass in this in this novel of show and not tell. I'm going to use the word story a lot because it really is compelling. Claudia Gray expresses her meaning and the meaning of her story through characters' choices primarily, rather than exposition. It's a classic storytelling 101, and Claudia Gray uses this incredibly convincingly. She uses this story to communicate themes very clearly, such as the arrogant short-sightedness of the Jedi, or the power of unity and hope through crisis that is ultimately shown by all involved. And the overall story, again, is the way this group decides not to hunker down and defend their own interests, although someone like Coley Lynn does for a little bit, the Nile on board do for a little bit, and they meet their timely or untimely end. Overall, the group itself adapts and grows, and Claudia Gray, she uses this device of an event that happens, and then characters reflect on it with words that somehow seem like exposition, but really it's the characters looking back and reflecting on their own growth, and it is part of their own character development. It really helps with the pace and our understanding of the story, but the pace of the overall novel that compared to Light of the Jedi and The Rising Storm, those were just breakneck, go go go, whereas this novel was well served by having a lot more reflective, meditative, slower, quieter moments of characters coming to their own self-understanding. And the expression of theme through story and reflection is best understood and is best shown, I'd say, through Stellan Gios's own story and on his own transformation, the way he overcomes Jedi triumphalism and Jedi arrogance to find unity in crisis. And it's important to note, Stellan, the novel is called The Fallen Star, and of course we think that refers to Starlight Beacon, but it also refers to Stellan himself. His name comes from the Latin stella, which means star. So Fallen Star, yes, the destruction of Starlight Beacon, as well as Stellan's own death. And I'll get to how convincing that was in a bit. The first moment, though, and this is reflected through some key moments in his story, and the first one I want to point out then is how Orla Jareni, the Wayseeker, they're all back on Starlight Beacon, and she confronts Stellan and says something very similar to what Luke tells Rey in The Last Jedi, right? The Force, the Order, or the Order does not control the Force. The Force does not belong to the Jedi, and Stellan really thinks it does and really feels it does, similar to Jorah Malley, the Togruta Jedi Master in Light of the Jedi, who in her council scene she goes into all that, and she really does believe that the Force wills whatever happens to be in the best interests of the Jedi, and Stellan believes that Luke in The Last Jedi, of course, doesn't. Orla Jareni confronts Stellan and says, no, the Force is beyond that, and expresses the concern to Stellan that he might get lost in the spotlight, that Stellan's own celebrity as the poster child for the Jedi really risks dehumanizing him the way celebrity often does. And really risks turning his own well-being or him sacrificing his own well-being, his own humanity and dignity for the sake of the Order's interests. Of course, he is the youngest master ever on the council at this point, but this is a problem for Stellan, and the problem for his ability to actually lead through this crisis as the Marshal of Starlight at this point. Avar is off chasing down who she believes to be the Eye of the Nihil. She ends up chasing down the Nihil leadership there. Anyways, the way this is shown, the way Stellan's arrogance in terms of the Jedi are the ones who control the light and the only ones who can actually have a say. This is shown throughout the novel, really, in that he has Elzar and Bell and Burry and whoever else, Nib at some points. They're gathered there with all their droids and trying to solve this problem and solve this crisis and lead confidently, and they can't show weakness. And yet there's this whole hangar full of technicians and pilots and engineers, all of them really willing to show up and help out and pitch in. And, two of them, the Adren couple, Pika Adren, I remember her name, they help build Starlight Beacon. And they don't, and Stellan doesn't consult them, doesn't ask, lead them in on the problem, doesn't want to show weakness. And that's a problematic place, and it delays their eventual resolution of the crisis. It delays their ability to actually get people to safety, and some people end up dying along the way. Now, all this being said, Stellan is able to encourage the Jedi going forward, and is able to have within himself a sense of what hope means and what unity means. And the one place I do want to quote at length and read from the novel, it's on page 190, about halfway down. And they're just confronted with the reality of the crisis. And Nib has said they're dealing with it. I'd hoped it wouldn't come to this in terms of dealing with the crisis itself. And Stellan's response is, Stellan sighed. In this moment, focused on the problem at hand, thinking only of others, he felt something like himself again for the first time in days. They're overwhelmed with all the different problems and all the different challenges that the Jedi are facing, this looming crisis and looming failure. And so what Stellan says is, this is what hope is. It isn't pretending that nothing will go wrong if only we try hard enough. It's looking squarely at all the obstacles in the way, knowing the limits of our own power and the possibility of failure, and moving ahead anyway. This is how we must proceed, with hope. And that's a beautiful reflection on the way we think hope often is optimism, that nothing's going to go wrong, that everything's going to be hunky-dory. And Stellan, at this moment, I think he's starting to turn. He's starting to realize, okay, there's going to be suffering involved here. There might be failure involved here, but moving forward, we put one foot in front of the other, put one turn of the wheel in front of the other, and do the best we can. And maybe he doesn't know it at the moment, but I think that becomes the whole point, that we step forward and do the best we can. Big example, it inspires Bell, who is all gung-ho and wants to rush in and do as much as he can. He wants to do everything. But instead he's able to focus on the one problem of getting to the medical tower and getting it docked with the Aram ship and saving all those lives. And then he takes the shuttle and he wants to come back into Starlight and help out, but he realizes, no, the best thing I can do is make sure that the docking, not the docking ships, the escape pods are clear and helping people escape. And so he's able to show that restraint of this is what I can do, and have that glimmer of hope going forward. And then finally, Stellan at the beginning of chapter 28, not finally, I'm getting to the finally. At the beginning of chapter 28, Stellan is able to see, he's looking out at Starlight Beacon, and he's seeing this fleet of support ships that had come to try and help. They can't actually come and help because Starlight is just falling apart. And it's the moment he realizes, seeing all these folks who aren't Jedi, are lay people, if I can use that term. They're mechanics and pilots and techs and whatnot. And he finally sees, we are all the Republic. This is what it truly means. Well, guess what? Bell had already experienced that when he rounded up everyone to go and help with the airlocks in his plan to make Starlight a little bit safer. He sees it again when when they finally work to get with the crew of the vessel to get the escape pods to go. Bell is surprised at how many folks are just willing to up and help and risk their lives to come together. But that story shows what we are all the Republic truly means. It isn't some pat political answer that, or political slogan rather, that Chancellor Lina So thinks is maybe using it as. We have the disaster at Valo. Maybe it isn't some bland optimistic celebration that can be easily met with disaster. It's coming together in the midst of crisis. The crisis that was faced with the Drengir, the crisis with the Nile. It's people coming together, and the importance, the essential role that those outside of the formal bounds of the Order are able to play in following the light side of the Force. And then, yes, the finally with Stellan's death, and I want to focus on that. I felt that was so incredibly convincing and so well earned. I know a lot of people were upset. I think they were upset with the vagueness of Burry. Is Burryaga still alive? He's willing to sacrifice himself for others earlier. This is a Padawan. He's younger. Well, younger, not necessarily numerically, but as a Wookiee. But Stellan, after recovering from the effects of the psychic weapon, he was able to avoid it. But he's cut off from the Force. He's weakened physically. He can't depend on the institutional power of the Jedi and the magical power of the Force. But he does have to come to rely on the wisdom of the Force, the commitment to upholding the well-being of the many, and he's finally able to heed Orla's confrontation to him. I'm quoting on page 330, and heeds his own comment about hope and moving forward. I'm quoting it from page 330 here. He thinks to himself, this is the first time I have acted with no thought for the Order, he realized. This is the first thing I have ever done only as myself, only because I knew it to be right. And of course, he's speaking of his choice to go and sacrifice himself to keep the station's thrusters going long enough. He goes and sacrifices himself, gets Elzar out of the way. Elzar, his own brush with the dark side, I'll get to in a minute. But Stellan is able to keep the thrusters going long enough for people to escape, and for the station to crash into the ocean rather than the populated city. So his choice, even in the midst of potential failure and death, ends up saving countless lives. And so Stellan's story shows, he's able to follow the light, even if it means the Order looks bad potentially. Stellan's story shows us to be a masterclass of payoff and setup as well. And I should say, another character. This is the first novel, the first High Republic story we've gotten that really has focused on Stellan and Elzar. The rest are, I mean, Elzar, we get a bit of characterization with his philandering and his brush with the dark side in The Rising Storm. But we also get with Elzar's story, and I'll raise at least a few examples there. There's the early setup of Elzar's handstand on the beach. He's under Orla Journey's training, trying to recover from his brush with the dark side. And there's the beautiful moment where he finally doesn't so much fight with the waves on the beach, and yet at the same time he's able to uphold his own integrity. And that's, of course, the poetic depiction of how he views the Force. That is his image of the Force, if you will. It's a poetic depiction of the theme of hope and unity in Crisis, the way Stellan expressed it, right? The wave, the storm is coming. We don't try and control it. We try and find our way through it. And then in chapter 24, I've mentioned this a few times on our main show, that what was set up with Elzar on the beach in his handstand and his realization of maintaining integrity, and part of that is incorporating the dark side. And even if that led to a moment of failure, it leads also to moments of hope and truth. And in chapter 24, that all that setup of Elzar at the beginning, it comes together in what I've said multiple times. It's one of the most beautiful lyrical moments in, I would say, all of canon. Amidst all the tension of Starlight's destruction, we actually step outside the station. We get Avar's perspective. She is, tracking down Lorna D. That's who I was mentioning. Tracking down Lorna D, and she comes back, and she has her in tow on the Ataraxia. And we actually see her perspective. She's then, I believe, crash landed on Aram. She is safe, but she's standing. I think that's the alternate cover, the special edition cover, seeing Starlight Beacon crash or fall through the atmosphere. But we get her perspective, and we get what I believe is maybe a dyad-like connection between her and Elzar. And Avar is trying to connect with everybody in her way of bolstering everyone through the Song of the Force, somewhat similar to battle meditation, but just like with what we saw with her in Light of the Jedi, she's trying to help people focus and strengthen them emotionally and physically by strengthening them spiritually. Elzar is able to hear Avar's song, and Avar, she's meditating, she's doing this group meditation thing. She hears Elzar's waves, and we can almost hear something like John Williams' Across the Stars. It's wonderfully written. It's very poignant. It's quite subtle. It isn't, she's hearing Elzar's sound or whatever, force. She just hears the sound of the waves. It is similar, I think, to the connection that Rey and Kylo Ren and Ben have in The Last Jedi. But, that's for another video, potentially. The point here with the story is that this moment that Elzar is able to bolster and latch on and trust and be have that foundational moment for him, it carries him to leadership, to being, again, not so dependent on the magical power of the Force, and he certainly hasn't been as dependent on the institutional power of the Jedi. He's able to lead and lead the rest of the Padawans and the rest of the Jedi, and the effort with the pilots and whatnot, to more or less largely to safety on the planet. And so it carries, so that moment with Avar and Elzar, I think really does carry the whole story wonderfully to the end. And with Stella, as I've described, with Stellan's death and with Starlight's destruction, and I found that entirely earned, and really guys, this is how you end a story. You set something up at the beginning, you lead characters through, you transform them, you show them themselves more truly. They're able to see themselves more truly. Bell is able to see himself far more constantly or confidently. Get that guy a knighthood. Come on. And you bring it to a satisfying conclusion that, it is a failure. Yes, Starlight Beacon is destroyed, but maybe the Jedi are fearful and embarrassed, and the Chancellor is fearful and embarrassed, but their soul remains intact. Their unity, their faith in each other, and their faith in the Jedi, or faith in the Force, I should say, does remain intact. Lastly, I want to make one point. Mark Yinro is, you could see he's the exception. Maybe you argue he's the exception to show and not tell, because frankly, all we get is him reflecting. We don't get him actually doing anything. I think it proves the rule that this reflection isn't so much exposition. He's already done all his work, and now he's just sitting and enjoying all the chaos that he's created. And that comes to its fulfillment in that classic terrorist responsibility video at the end, in the epilogue, which cements it for me. It cements that Charles Soule, Claudia Gray, and the Luminous team, they've really done it. They've really created a villain who is as fearsome and formidable as Palpatine, Vader, Thrawn. You can't reason with him. He's already so convinced that his cause is righteous, and his cause for himself is righteous. And I can't wait to see more of where his story goes. In further stories, the comic, The Eye of the Storm, and the rest of the end of Phase 1 of the High Republic. But my recommendation overall is definitely read this book. Read as much as you want for High Republic overall. People, again, recapping this point. What order do we read? What should we read? Read as much as you can. Read as much as you want. Especially read in publication order, the way it's set out. If you have to pick just one book, I really think, at least this is my immediate reaction. I might change this, but if you have to pick just one book, it's that. Read this one, The Fallen Star. This destruction of Starlight, the ascendancy of Markian, he's really inflicted this wound upon the galaxy. The reason why the Jedi are in retreat back to Coruscant 200 years later, I think really can be traced to this moment. This failure to uphold Chancellor So's beacon of unity and hope. And the themes of upholding faith in each other and faith in the Force through this crisis. So definitely worth a read. If you'd like to, check the notes below. You can buy the hardcover on Amazon in the link below. Or if you'd like to listen to it on Audible for free, you can check the link in the description as well, another link, and for a free 1-month subscription to Audible, and you get the 1 credit. Each subscription does support the Ion Canon podcast and the Culture Slate Network, meaning more commentary, news, and reviews every single week, and more special episodes just like this.